G'day and welcome to Kenty Blitz, your daily hit of NRL news. Kenty, big win for the Reds this morning in the Premier League. They won the championship this morning.
Yeah, a few sore heads on the Mersey, I imagine, so well done to them.
They'll still be partying, I suspect. I know there's a lot of Liverpool fans who watch the show and a lot of EPL fans, so congrats to the Reds and congrats to all the fans out there. A big night ahead. Mate...
Not so good news here.
No. Jeez. So what's happened? We've had a weekend with 18 sin bins.
18 sin bins, and it just sort of went from the sublime to the ridiculous as the weekend progressed. It was just, what, another one. And fans are in outrage. The media's obviously jumped all over it. Andrew Abdal's come out and tried to placate everybody, say, look, there probably was a slight overreaction. We're going to unpack it a little bit now, Warren, and just go through it all. But it was just one of those things. I think they just did all... The best intentions and the worst result is what I think they did. But the NRL's got a real problem. It annoyed a lot of fans over the weekend. And as the weekends progressed, what became particularly galling was there was sin bins for players that everyone was like, what's that for? But we'll get to that. So away we go.
So there was, there was the same amount of sin bins on the weekend as the first 5 rounds combined.
Yeah. So, look, the NRL has claimed today. So, Andrew Abdo was on Mark Levy this morning on 2GB and spoke about that. And he said that there was no specific direction for a crackdown on the high tackles. So, what's happened is a few weeks back, we had a few incidents in the game where we saw tackles that probably should have resulted in harsher punishments. And what came out of that was that the NRL said, look, there is a offence there, there's a sin bin there, please use it. And they had a bit of a talk to the referees about doing that. And, like the game is famous for, we over-adjusted. So we've gone into this weekend and we've over-adjusted on the sin bins. I don't know why. It's like they got a kick out of it. It feels like they've been given a directive because every game had it. It's not like one referee just went rogue and we had to sit back and go, what the hell's going on? But they all did it. And out of that, we saw one game, then the next game, then the next game. And then by Sunday morning, Andrew Johns, the immortal, who's one of the most astute rugby league brains in the game, he just said it's become farcical. And there were sin bins that we don't really know what we know what they were for because they explained to us later. But it doesn't look like the sin bin actually, or the offence fit the crime. And if did at the very, very lower end. So we saw that several times over the weekend.
And you're at the game yesterday on the hill
at Leica, yeah.
What was the feeling with? I mean, some of those were puzzling, right?
Well, the big one there was Polly when he hit Tom Hazelton, and at that point in the game, when he went off, everybody was like, "What?" Because you don't hear the commentary, you can't hear you can't hear the audio of what's going on and the explanation. Leichhardt Oval only has one screen. The replays aren't crash hot that they show there. But what happens is out of that, you sort of try and say, okay, what was that for? And it was a conversation on the hill. What was that for? What was that for? And there was a little bit of talk about whether it was a high tackle or people were offering other reasons why it could have been. No one really knew, to be fair, until we all got home later and read about it. So the confusion in that, and to be fair, it was at the lightest end. And with the game at that point in the game...
18-12, wasn't it, at that stage?
It was 18-12. Cronulla came back and with the player in the sin bin, Polly in the sin bin, Cronulla scored, made it 18-all, set the game into extra time. So it did have some impact on the game. And certainly the game was tight enough at that point that any major refereeing decision was going to have an impact on the game, which it ultimately did. But we've got to... We've got to try and work our way through it. We've got to try and figure this out. I get the fan outrage. I get people saying they're spoiling the product. But if we want to reach back and go big picture, the big picture is that this is brought in to protect the player, these rules. That's what they're there for. One of the things that Andrew Abdo spoke about this morning is he said last year there was 201 head-high tackles after 8 rounds, which is where we're at now. This year there's been 379.
Yeah, right.
Now that is a big increase. And
why is that? I mean, why are a coach's teaching their players to go higher? Why that?
I think you've seen the improvement of some teams for a start in the competition defensively. They're probably, without knowing this for sure, they probably are leading the upsurge in numbers. And the reason players are tackling high is because of this modern style where they're taught to tackle over the ball to stop the offload. Okay, they're taught to come in not on the ball, because on the ball you can bounce off the ball, if that makes sense. So they come in over the ball. But what that means is you've got a very small target region. The way players carry the ball these days, you've probably only got, I would say at best 6 inches. But you have probably 4 to 6 inches as a target zone. So at the speed of the game, the fatigue in the game, and the small target zone, there's not a lot of room for error. And that error is what the referees are deciding upon. Now, again, big picture, the game's got to protect itself from this growing enemy of concussions and long-term dementia and Alzheimer's and all that we don't know where that's going. We've got researchers out there at the moment, they're looking into all this, but the safety and the future of the game is at stake. So the NRL, in its role, is trying to protect that. We're seeing it happen in other sports around the world. The NRL is trying to get ahead of that with what they know on. It's basically a best practice scenario of what they're trying to do. I do believe we're seeing slow change, if no change, from the clubs. And for me, the big failing in all this is the lack of cooperation between the NRL and what they're trying to achieve, and the clubs being asked to come into line and work with them. Clubs are resisting it. Clubs are doing what they always do when there's a crackdown. They don't like it, so they'll resist it, and they'll resist it long enough. And this might be the point now, which is what's happened in the past, is we've got to that point where we have a fan blow up. Everyone says, mate, ruining the game, the spectacle's not what it was. We're not getting the fair results. So the NRL, which they've sort of already started to relent today on radio, we've probably overstepped the mark. So this weekend, there's no doubt they'll pull back. But Warren, I don't know where we go with this. See, I'm a supporter of the NRL trying to eliminate these high tackles out of the game. Now, everyone will say that. I said some weeks back, though, they need to start getting rid of this. And I said the only way you can do that is through punishments and penalties, which is what we've seen, but what we're not now happy with. Because what you've got to do is, I think it's like this. It's like when you buy a little pup. Yeah, the way you house train a baby pup is simple rules and strict punishment. Yep. It's as simple as that. Yeah, same with your kids, for all those parents out there. But it's simple rules, so no one knows. Everyone knows what the rules are. Everyone knows what the rules are, and they know the consequences if they break those rules. The NRL's tried to do it this weekend, but they won't have the nerve to stick to it. But to get there, what they should be doing, the smart way they should be doing, and the way the administration should be working through all this, is they actually should be sitting there and seeking that cooperation of the clubs. I don't think they're going to get it now.
Can they do that mid-season? No, I mean, this is mid-season. Like we're a third of the way through the season.
Yeah,
I think this is what pisses fans off. Because all of a sudden, some new rule to play the ball, they're not concentrating on that anymore, and now it's all hide stuff and
Look, it's like this, okay? Yes, I would argue they're professional players. They spend all week training to play.
But can they change their tackling side halfway through?
Well, they should be able to. It shouldn't take more than, you would think, a few weeks to get it all right.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Second to that, though, I also get the argument that they probably do need. I just think they need the coaches to come in, sit down, because the coaches are the ones that resist the rules first. The other thing I feel sorry for with the players is this tackling style has been allowed to go on now, and it's reaching, through the concussion argument, it's reaching concerning levels. If the concussion argument wasn't there, we'd live with it. We'd all go, okay, let's just live with it. But the way the modern footballer tackles and the modern player, most of them have been doing this their whole lives. They've been learning this. They've been learning this as kids. They've been learning it because this tackling style has been around that long. But the other thing is too, there's all little minor ways you can break it down, the way you swing your shoulder in a tackle, the way you rotate your arm around that can sort of bring momentum through the tackle that did not used to be there 30 years ago. You suck the arm out, they hit the shoulder, and you sort of almost absorb the tackle rather than come in with a little bit of a violent intent. So there has been a certain shift that way, which has, again, made it difficult. But without the cooperation of the coaches, the NRL may as well just go and just start trying to hammer in nails with their head. You know what I mean? They're not going to be able. They're not going to be able to seek a way through it. They're not going to be able to bust through that wall.
Who's responsible at NRL headquarters? Because you talk about the cooperation of the coaches. To me, it probably makes sense to have former coaches, recently retired coaches or coaches looking for a job, working for the NRL. Who's responsible? Is it only one or two individuals who make these decisions which change the game and piss everybody off and give us something to talk about, but not something we want to talk about?
Yeah, well, look, okay, you work. The commission's there for the growth of the game to implement the.
But they only meet once a month.
Yeah, I get that. No, look, in the day-to-day running, the job sits with Graham Annesley, who's the head of football. He runs basically the football operation at the NRL. Now, Annesley last year and for some years has been coming out weekly on his Mondays and giving his explanation of the weekend's decisions and all the rest of it. This year, the NRL decided not to do that. We probably really needed it today. Okay, that would have been vital to hear today about why and how they've got there. Okay, but he's the boss of the football at the NRL. He's the guy that runs the football operation, runs the product on the weekend. He then speaks to the referees. Okay, he also deals with coaches and all that if he has to, but he speaks to the referees and he runs the referees, and clearly they've been spoken to. But out of that, Abdo sits over that as the boss of the game. The sad part about it, he's a very good administrator, but he really doesn't have any.
He's not a football brain.
He doesn't have DNA in the game. He didn't grow up with rugby league. He's come to the game basically as a good administrator that the game was searching for, but not a rugby league person. So a lot of the subtleties and nuances of tackling technique and that are not there. And I dare say he probably doesn't understand the shift in tackling technique over the years to understand how it's got to where it has and why it's got to where it has. And that's probably something that needs to be understood, so then you can start to try and peel it back. Because once again, the whole point of this, while it frustrates everybody and annoys everybody with the results, it's there to protect the player. And Warren, I know too many players who are in hospital with dementia or have recently died of dementia or some years back died of dementia, and it's a worrying thing. Now, what we don't know is, given the higher impact of the game, the higher speed and velocity, the more power, the fitter player, the bigger player, all of that, what we don't know is, will this result one day in 30 years' time when these players who are now playing the game are then retired and they're hitting 50 and 60, will we see this growth in dementia and brain injury then when the brain begins to age and wither? Will we see a burst of players suddenly sick who well before their time? And that's what the NRL's trying to head off. That's where they're trying to get to go. But they've done such a poor job of executing what they're trying to do. Firstly, the communication has been poor. Two, there's been no cooperation from the clubs, coaches, players. Three, the fans have not been let in on it. The fans have been left to sit there and just express their anxiety and anger about and frustration about all this, without understanding and in some cases not wanting to even know about why it's there for. So the whole thing's just that they've stuffed it up in so many different ways.
Week to week, things seem to change. And that's what the frustrating thing is, a fan. And what the fans are calling for is the game they look for. 1 week is not the game they watch the next week. Yeah,
and then, look, if you want to start to unpack that, you see incidents over the weekend, like Polly, was it a shoulder charge or was it a head-eye tackle? No one quite knew. The argument was taking place on the hill. I think it was a shoulder charge. Looked at the replay, didn't look like a shoulder charge. Well, surely it can't be a high tackle. Like, you can't call that. But anyway, it came back later. It was a high tackle. But then you see other incidents. You see Tom Travojevic basically gets a split across his nose, clearly hit high by Isaiah Yeo. Clearly, nothing. Not sin bin, not sent off, like nothing. You see, the whole weekend has just been rife with inconsistent decisions, which drives everybody nuts. And again, this is a rod for the NRL's back, because the NRL, in a bid to make the game more consistent and get rid of, an incident in this game being okay, but an incident in this game over here not being okay, to get rid of that, they brought in the bunker where we have this $2 million a year it costs them. If not, it's probably going up now. It probably costs a lot more. But $2 million a year to sit in their little bunker in Redfern, where the same people supposedly are going over the games and therefore can apply the same criteria to decisions or incidents, which then means we can start to see some consistency between incidents. But it's not happening.
No.
So we sit there and you go, well, hang on, so it's not happening. And it's the same guys apparently making the decisions here.
Who haven't been told, apparently.
Well, look, haven't been told there's a crackdown.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
So, but look, they could have gone a little bit rogue themselves and decided that they were going to try and fix things up.
From watching the show, maybe.
But let's hope so.
Friends of the show.
But let's hope that they start to get it right. The NRL can sort of try and get back on the same page certainly with the clubs, the coaches, but also the fans. We've sat here all year. Peter V'landys and Andrew Abdo have told everyone how the numbers are the best ever. It's now more people watch NRL than watch watch AFL. He's got to go to market. He's got to sell the game. He's got to ask for top dollar. And there's this whole burst of enthusiasm and love for the game and this energy for the game, that the game has never been looking better. And yet we make some of these decisions where I just don't get why they are unable to see it through. We have a crackdown, doesn't work. We have no consistency, and we undermine all the good work the game's done.
Yeah,
and we allow it to happen. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing too often in rugby league.
Is it time to blow up the bunker?
Oh, look, I'm starting to go that way. Look, I understand the theory of the bunker. First off, this idea now of the bunker going back to previous sets, I think is ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. Yeah, you can't be doing that. Like, I'm all for player protection and all the rest of it, but you've also got to say, look, the game's a game, and if we've sailed down a certain avenue, let's just stick with it. You can't be going back 8 tackles, 9 tackles, and then say something's happened here. We need to make a decision on it. The bunker should be able to make a quicker decision. Just quietly on the side there, that we saw that first Canberra try on Sunday. They dead set took 15 minutes to make a decision.
Sucked the life out of it, didn't it?
And it did. It really did.
Yeah, it did.
And so to come through that, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, I think, in many instances, the bunker. So it is frustrating. I think, look, I don't know if there's a better system. I know there's a system that's sort of been picked up and used up other places around the world, and it seems to work. I don't know whether you blow up the bunker or you just sort of have a look at the people and just say, look, mate, you've got to make decisions. We're led to believe that there's all these cameras in there, and they've got multiple people looking at multiple angles. But on the weekend, we saw this when the winger's foot was off the ground. Was it off the ground? Was it on the ground? Was it off the ground? Was it on the ground? Is he still touching the ball when he's... And it just went back and forth. It just can't be happening. The bunker's got to... I think the bunker really needs to just be streamlined into quicker decisions. We make it... Almost you can make the point where we need cooperation from the broadcasters, that they don't continually repeat stuff to bring the bunker undone. So the bunker makes a decision. We have the decision. We move on. Now, if some little guy sitting in a back room says, actually, I think they got this wrong, you don't want the broadcaster then coming on and then showing multiple replays of how the bunker's stuffed up. Like, the decision's been made. The game can't change. Let's move on.
Yeah, problem with that, Kenty, is then we talk about the integrity of the game and, people making decisions which are wrong, and then they're not getting called out, and then the NRL's controlling the media, and then we get to that, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but Warren, I've been around sport long enough to understand that sometimes you just don't get the right decision. Like, I'm happy to live with the wrong decision. I'd rather live with the wrong decision every now and then to the bunker basically just coming in and just killing the energy of the game by these long-winded replays that we just got to go over and over and over again. And yeah, I get this. The players, no player has ever played a perfect game. Mm-hmm. Referees are the same. Fans don't necessarily want to agree with that. They expect perfection out of the referees. Referees make mistakes. As long as it's not a dishonest mistake, as long as the referee is not making multiple mistakes, you can live with the odd one that they get wrong. Yeah, the problem with the bunking and the whole refereeing is officiating now is, in the old days, referee go, knock on, and you say to the referee, mate, you got that wrong. He picked it up before it hit the ground or whatever. Referee go, mate, I know, I'll fix it up for you. So that's what they do. They square up. So you get the square up. So you go to a scrum because you're knocked on. 2 tackles later, the opposition have the ball because they won the scrum. Yeah. And the referee blow some penalty for
incorrect play the ball.
Well, something incorrect play the ball. Another scrum, give you the feed. Yeah. Okay, we fix that error. Now they can't do that. But they had a way of equalising. That was the old school way of doing it. They equalised the game a little bit. The times players are offside. Mate, they're offside. Yeah, you're right. They give you a way to square it up. These days, every decision is adjudicated on its own. With supposedly no memory of anything happened. It's far too analysed and public now. We can hear the referees are mic'd up. We can see multiple replays. We see all that. So we can't have that. I get that. But it doesn't necessarily mean we've made it better either.
How would Barry Gomersall go in these days in those state of origins where it was?
Brisbane would be undefeated.
Very good, mate. I think the frustrating thing for fans is now I think they're understanding how much this 10 minutes in the sin bin is affecting, and the crackdown has emphasised that on the weekend. And teams and the results are changing because of 10 minutes in the sin bin.
Yeah, they are. Look, that's always been the part of the game. There's been a cost there in the game, and I remember only about 2 or 3 years ago, they started putting an argument forward for a 5-minute sin bin. Mm-hmm. Should we bring that back? 5 minutes. When they first brought in the sin bin way back when, there was a 5-minute sin bin and a 10-minute sin bin, and the referee. Yeah, but again, the referees couldn't. We were always in an argument over whether it deserved 5 minutes or 10. Yeah. So in the end, they said, you know what, let's get rid of 5, and we'll give it 10. I get the argument. The big problem, the game there, the way I see it, is when you lose a player, teams are firstly so good at exploiting wherever that player's missing from in the defensive line. They'll target that area and they'll go through it. So that's one, and they can catch you short, depending on who's out. They'll catch you short. But the other part to it also is that the game used to be able to, if you had a player sent off or you had a player sin bin, you used to be able to do things to artificially safeguard yourself. You could slow the game down a little bit. You can start kicking it into touch a bit more. You do things like that to take the ball out of play, just so to minimise the time that you're operating with one player on the field. The other thing that's missing from the game, though, is contested possessions. So back then, if you had a good hooker, you'd say, okay, let's just keep kicking it into touch. Yeah, we'll go to the scrum. We'll get the hooker. Remember they used to actually count that percentage of how many scrums they'd win the hookers. Every time the hookers come up against each other, you'd see who the better hooker was. Now it's irrelevant. But
hookers don't even hook the ball anymore. They're at the back of the scrum.
Exactly. They're playing lock.
Yeah.
But so what they used to be able to do, with contested possessions, you could find ways to get the ball back. You could steal the ball in a tackle, which you kind of can do these days. You could rake the ball back in the play of the ball. You could go to a scrum, and you could just hope that a big push. Remember the big push, try and win the scrum, get the ball back. So, but that doesn't happen now. And so what happens in the game is primarily if you're just getting through your sets, you're already travelling pretty well. Secondly, if you are one player down, and they're getting through their sets against you, it's almost impossible to hold them out. And you can't. But there's no way to get the ball off them. If they're getting through their sets, getting a tackle 6 kicking, or getting tackle 6 rolling in goals, or coming out of yardage and whack a 40-20 downfield, there's just no way to get the ball off them. There's limited way. You're buggered.
They score a try to get the ball back off the kickoff.
Yeah.
What do you think about the idea, like the American hockey idea where someone goes in the penalty box or they go off the ice for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on what the offence is, and if they score, they're back on. Could that work in the NRL?
Look, it's been discussed before. It's something that comes up fairly regularly.
Yep.
I think it could work in the NRL, and I think given the lack of contested possessions, it's probably something the NRL should consider doing. And it'd have to be when they score, the score would have to come from a try, not a penalty goal.
Yes.
Okay, you'd have to look at it that way. But if you want to do it that way, look, I'm not against that. It's certainly not worth dismissing. It's something that should be considered, because not every team that suffered penalties sin bins on the weekend conceded a lot of points. But the other thing is, Warren, we saw a lot of games on the weekend where both sides conceded players to the sin bin. Yeah. So it kind of evened out. But look, that's an option. That's an option that they can consider. But I don't know. Like the game's just got to sit down, and I really think the NRL needs to give itself a kick up the bum and just say, you know what, we're mishandling this. We need to work with the clubs on this. We need to explain to the clubs the seriousness of it and what the future might look like if we sit there. 379 head-high tackles in 8 rounds of football is a lot. That is a lot. That's a lot of high shots, and that's too much. Players didn't get tackled this high back in the day. They just didn't. There just wasn't this many high tackles back in the day. They've got other reasons for the brain injuries. They packed in the scrums and would headbutt each other. They punched on a lot more back then. There's a bit of stiff arm in that all back then. But back then, send-offs were far more prevalent than they are today. We've educated ourselves to think now that send-offs and sin bins are dirty words, right? That shouldn't be happening in the game. You need some discipline there. You need something there to prevent people from just basically going nuts. Like Tupanur on the weekend, he should be looking at 6 weeks. He's
for his knees.
His knees were terrible. The first one should have been a send-off, but if you watch the replay, he actually hits him twice. It should have. I don't. And see,
I saw that.
That's this tolerance that we've become accustomed to for foul shots that never used to be there in the game. In the old days, you do that, his teammates would have come in and they would have had an all-in brawl and would have been thought. You know what I mean? That's the way the game would have rolled. Today, they're not allowed to do anything. They come in, they bit of shirt grabbing, pushing around, a few names called to each other, and that's it. But for the bunker to miss that, not I would have sent him off. It was not a sin bin. It was a send-off. It was a blatant knee to the head. It was a clear send-off. He should have been sent. But if you watch the replay, I urge you, go and watch the replay on YouTube. It's on all the media websites. He then follows through with his left knee and hits him again. It's just, but that's the frustration part to it. Like a clear send-off is he's left on the field. He was left on the field. And yet, Polly, we're wondering what he's actually done. It was that minor, yet he gets 10 minutes in the sin bin.
You know, I think the frustrating thing also for fans is I think the at-game experience is worse than being home on TV. You know,
for sure.
You don't ever know what's going on out there.
Well, all you get at a lot of games now is rock and roll music between in slow periods of play. Yeah, get rid of that. But the other part is, you're not some grounds you can go and they'll put a little thing up what the penalty was for. Which, look, if you're at one end, I was sitting at the end of the field where I watched the game, and the incident happened at the other end of the field, and so it was very hard to actually see. And once it happens, it's like, what's that for? Because you don't get a replay on the field. You turn around and watch the big screen. It was okay, but we couldn't figure out what it was for.
And they got Sweet Caroline playing over the bloody game.
Exactly. Yeah, that sort of stuff. So I'm not a fan of it, but they've got to improve that. They've got to improve the fan experience for everyone. That goes for the home ones. That goes for everybody at home that's been frustrated with these sin bins over the weekend because they don't know what the game's trying to achieve. So come out, explain to us, tell us why it's wrong, get the coaches involved, get the coaches on board, and get them to they are the ones that can solve the problem. They are the ones that have to teach these guys to tackle differently. Andrew Johns, I found interesting. He says that if they try to go, Scott Sorensen tries to go low on the weekend, he could bust the shoulder. I found that interesting. I want to know why.
I think that's very interesting. Can you talk about it tomorrow or today?
Well,
let's talk about it tomorrow. See you then.